Hollywood's golden age sold the world a beautiful lie of palatial mansions and immortal stars, but for many, the dream curdled into a nightmare of debt and despair. This is the untold story of the stars Hollywood chewed up and spit out, leaving them with nothing but broken dreams and empty bank accounts. Our first star, Bela Lugosi, was more than an actor, he was a phenomenon. When he swept onto the screen in 1931's Dracula, his hypnotic gaze and aristocratic menace terrified and mesmerized audiences worldwide. Lugosi didn't just play the Count, he became him, defining the character for all time and cementing his place as the undisputed king of horror. He was an overnight sensation, a household name whose very presence promised a delicious, sophisticated kind of terror. Yet, this iconic role became a gilded cage, and Lugosi found himself trapped inside. Studio heads, blinded by his success, refused to see him as anything other than the vampire he so brilliantly portrayed. While his contemporaries like Boris Karloff found diverse and challenging roles, Lugosi was shunted into a never-ending parade of cheaper, increasingly humiliating B-movie horror flicks. His artistic ambitions suffocated under the weight of his own immortal creation. The public never knew the secret agony he carried from a wound suffered in the First World War, a debilitating, long-term addiction to morphine and methadone. This hidden battle became the driving force of his later life, a voracious beast that consumed every penny he earned. The meager paychecks from films like Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla went directly to feeding his addiction, leaving him powerless and broke. Bela Lugosi's final curtain call came not on a grand stage, but in a modest Los Angeles apartment where he died of a heart attack, virtually penniless. It's a tragic state that a powerful Hollywood legend was born. His friend, Frank Sinatra, stepped in to pay for the funeral of the man who built Universal's horror empire. It's a compelling story of compassion, but it's a myth. The less glamorous truth is that the costs were quietly covered by his final wife, Hope, and his former wife, Lillian. At the request of his wife and son, he was buried in the one thing he could never escape, his iconic Dracula cape, a final, somber reminder of the role that gave him everything and took it all away. Veronica Lake. Next, we have Veronica Lake, the sultry, mysterious blonde who took the 1940s by storm. Boo hairstyle, with a wave of blonde cascading over one eye, became a national obsession. She was so influential that during World War II, the US government personally asked her to change it, fearing women factory workers would get their hair caught in the machinery. For a time, she wasn't just a star, she was a national treasure, powder keg. Lake quickly earned a reputation for being notoriously difficult to work with, a problem compounded by a domineering mother who horribly mismanaged her finances. Her fiery temperament and reported clashes with co-stars began to burn every professional bridge she had. The studios, tired of the on-set battles, began to turn their backs on their once golden girl. Her fall from the A-list was as swift as her rise. A series of failed marriages, struggles with mental illness, and a deepening dependence on alcohol pushed her further into the margins. She suffered a series of injuries that impacted her ability to work, and eventually, the one-time superstar simply vanished from the public eye altogether. The spotlight she once commanded had moved on, leaving her completely in the shadows. Years later, the shocking truth of her fate was revealed when a reporter for the New York Post found her. The great Veronica Lake, the Peekaboo Girl, was working as a cocktail waitress and barmaid at the Martha Washington Hotel in Manhattan, unrecognizable to the patrons she served. She died years later from hepatitis and acute kidney injury, her fortune gone and her spectacular fame just a distant, tragic memory. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was the face of post-war Disney, the studio's very first actor signed to an exclusive, ironclad contract. He was Disney's golden boy, winning a special Juvenile Academy Award for his work and, most famously, becoming the voice and live-action model for The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, Peter Pan. To millions of children, his energy and spark were the very embodiment of youthful adventure and magic. Then, the unthinkable happened. As Driscoll went through puberty, his voice deepened and his face, once boyish, developed severe acne. The magic kingdom he helped build suddenly had no use for him. In a move of shocking coldness, Disney abruptly terminated his contract, casting him out of the studio gates without a second thought, because his changing face was no longer profitable. Shunned by the industry that had raised him, Driscoll's life spiraled into darkness. Unable to escape his past as a child star, he struggled to find work and fell into heavy drug use, developing a severe heroin addiction. He drifted from Los Angeles to New York, eventually becoming a fixture in Andy Warhol's underground art scene, a ghost of his former self, haunted by the boy he used to be. The end of his story is one of Hollywood's most horrific. In 1968, his body was found by two children playing in an abandoned, derelict tenement in Greenwich Village. With no identification, he was classified as a homeless person and buried in an unmarked pauper's grave on Hart Island. It was over a year before his own mother, searching for him, learned of his fate through a fingerprint match from his arrest records. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer was never meant to be a typical Hollywood starlet. She was brilliant, breathtakingly beautiful, but also fiercely independent and outspoken, refusing to play the sycophantic games the studio system demanded of its female stars. She openly disdained the superficiality of the industry and wasn't afraid to say so. Her intelligence and defiance were seen by the men in power not as assets, but as dangerous signs of instability. The system decided to make an example of her. A routine traffic stop in 1942 escalated into a public spectacle, with Farmer's defiant behavior leading to her arrest and a courtroom scene that the press portrayed as a complete mental breakdown. The studios, eager to rid themselves of this difficult actress, fueled the media frenzy, painting her as unhinged and out of control, effectively destroying her career and reputation overnight. What followed was a living nightmare. Farmer was forcibly institutionalized, beginning a years-long ordeal in asylums. While many of the most extreme stories surrounding her time there remain debated, the documented facts are horrific enough. She was subjected to electroconvulsive shock therapy and brutal ice-water hydrotherapy treatments against her will, a systematic effort to break the spirit of the woman Hollywood could not control. Upon her release, Frances Farmer was a ghost of her former self, a quiet and broken woman. The fire that once defined her was extinguished, and she spent years working menial jobs, from hotel clerk to laundry sorter, just to survive. Though she had a brief, late-in-life comeback as a local TV host in Indianapolis, she died of esophageal cancer in 1970, her estate declared to have no value. Gail Russell. Gail Russell was one of Hollywood's most stunningly beautiful actresses, but she was also one of its most reluctant. A painfully shy and introverted young woman, she had no desire for fame and was pushed into the limelight by an intensely ambitious mother, thrown into major roles opposite stars like John Wayne. She was terrified of the camera and the constant scrutiny, finding herself completely overwhelmed by the pressures of stardom. Crippling stage fright and extreme anxiety, Russell turned to a dangerous form of liquid courage: alcohol. What began as a crutch to get her through a scene soon spiraled into a full-blown addiction that would come to define her life and career. The very thing she used as a tool to perform her job became the weapon of her own destruction, a tragic cycle she couldn't escape. Her private struggles soon became public humiliation. Her career was derailed by a series of alcohol-related scandals that became tabloid fodder, including multiple arrests for drunk driving. In one notorious incident in 1957, a blackout drunk Russell drove her car straight into the front window of a Los Angeles coffee shop, an event that cemented her image as a tragic, out-of-control figure. Gail Russell's final scene was a desperately lonely one. In August 1961, she was found dead in her small apartment at the age of just 36, surrounded by numerous empty liquor bottles. The official cause of death was listed as liver damage related to acute alcoholism, but the coroner made another heartbreaking note. She was also suffering from severe malnutrition. She had died broke, forgotten, and utterly alone. George Reeves. To an entire generation of children in the 1950s, George Reeves wasn't just an actor, he was Superman. As the star of the hit television series Adventures of Superman, he embodied truth, justice, and the American way. He was a hero, a symbol of invincible strength and moral certainty who flew into living rooms across the nation every week. For millions, the line between George Reeves and the Man of Steel was non-existent. But this iconic role became a velvet trap. Like Bela Lugosi, Reeves was hopelessly typecast, and his dreams of becoming a serious dramatic actor and director evaporated. No one would hire him for other roles, forcing him to make a living through grueling personal appearances, often in the Superman costume he grew to utterly despise. He felt like a carnival act, trapped by the very cape that made him famous. The story of his end is just as shocking and debated as any Hollywood mystery. Just days before he was scheduled to be married, Reeves was found dead in his home from a single gunshot wound to the head. The official police ruling was suicide, but the circumstances were bizarre. No fingerprints on the gun, multiple other bullet holes in the room, and his fiancée and house guests downstairs. The ruling has been fiercely contested for decades. Adding to the mystery was the state of his finances. Despite starring in one of the most popular shows on television, his salary was shockingly low, and he struggled financially throughout the show's run. He died with very little money to his name, leaving behind an estate mired in controversy and debt. The man who could leap tall buildings in a single bound died unable to escape the financial realities of his fame. Hattie McDaniel. In 1940, Hattie McDaniel made history. For her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind, she became the first African American to ever win an Academy Award, a monumental achievement in a deeply segregated Hollywood. She was a trailblazer, a powerful talent who shattered a barrier that had seemed impenetrable. On that night, she represented a flicker of hope for what could be possible. But the reality of her career was one of cruel irony and constant struggle. While she broke a significant barrier, she was heavily criticized by civil rights groups for perpetuating stereotypes by playing maid and servant roles, the only roles Hollywood would consistently offer her. Even on the night of her historic Oscar win, she wasn't allowed to sit with her white co-stars, but was relegated to a segregated table at the back of the room. Perhaps the most heartbreaking injustice came at the end of her life. As she was dying of breast cancer, Hattie McDaniel stated her final wish: to be buried in the prestigious Hollywood Forever Cemetery, to rest alongside the other stars she had worked with. Her request was denied. The cemetery had a strict whites-only policy at the time, delivering one final, posthumous act of racism to the woman who had made Oscar history. The final insult came when the details of her will were made public, after a lifetime of work that included nearly 100 films. The trailblazing actress's estate was found to be insolvent, valued at less than $10,000. It was immediately beset by creditors and claims, leaving virtually nothing behind. The woman who gave an Oscar-winning performance as a loyal servant was, in the end, treated as little more than one by the industry she helped build. Errol Flynn was the definitive swashbuckler, the blueprint for every action hero who followed. As the impossibly handsome and athletic star of films like The Adventures of Robin Hood and Captain Blood, he radiated a charm and roguish charisma that was irresistible. He wasn't just playing an adventurer on screen. He lived a life of thrilling recklessness that was just as captivating as any of his films. His off-screen exploits were so legendary they became part of Hollywood folklore. The non-stop parties, the legendary drinking, and the scandalous escapades with women were so notorious they gave birth to a popular phrase, "in like Flynn." He burned the candle at both ends and in the middle, embodying a life of pure, unapologetic hedonism that both fascinated and scandalized the public. But this relentless debauchery came at a horrific physical price. Flynn's addictions to alcohol and narcotics ravaged his body, aging him prematurely and destroying his once legendary good looks. By his late 40s, he looked decades older, his health so poor that studios found it nearly impossible to get him insured for films. The handsome hero was now a crumbling wreck. When Flynn died of a massive heart attack at the age of just 50, the coroner's report delivered a truly shocking verdict. The medical examiner stated that due to the extreme, long-term damage from substance abuse, Flynn's body had the physical constitution of a man of 75. His years of hard living had internally corroded him, leaving the body of an old man inside a 50-year-old shell. The final surprise came when his finances were laid bare. Despite being one of the biggest stars in the world for 2 decades, Errol Flynn's estate was a complete financial catastrophe. He was deep in debt to the Internal Revenue Service and numerous other creditors, leaving behind a tangled disaster of IOUs and legal claims. The man who seemed to have the world on a string died without a penny to his name. Mae Murray. In the silent era, few stars shone brighter than Mae Murray. Known as the girl with the bee-stung lips, she was a former Ziegfeld Follies dancer who clawed her way to the top, becoming a self-made movie queen. She was famous for her dramatic, over-the-top acting style and for inventing a dance craze called the waltz madness. a testament to her flair and popularity in their roaring 20s. Her downfall began with her marriage to a man who claimed to be a Georgian prince, an act that inflated her already massive ego to catastrophic proportions. Believing herself to be true royalty, Murray began making absurd demands on set and clashing with powerful studio heads like Louis B. Mayer. Her difficult behavior and delusions of grandeur quickly saw her branded as box office poison. Her ultimate career suicide came at the dawn of the sound era. Convinced that MGM could not survive without her, she defiantly walked out on her contract over a dispute. She was horribly wrong. The industry, tired of her antics and rapidly evolving with the advent of talkies, simply moved on without her, and her career came to a screeching, permanent halt. Her later years were a portrait of tragic decline, penniless and suffering from severe delusions. She was often found wandering the street of St. Louis and New York City, a lost and confused figure. She would tell complete strangers that she was the famous Mae Murray, waiting for her Georgian prince to return and restore her to her rightful place. The once great star had become a pitiable public spectacle. Mae Murray died in 1965 in the Motion Picture House and Hospital in Woodland Hills, a charity home established to care for destitute and forgotten members of the film industry. She was the very definition of the people it was built for. The girl with the bee-stung lips, the queen of the silent screen, died a ward of the industry that had long since forgotten her name. A final, quiet testament to her spectacular fall. Judy Garland. Judy Garland was, quite simply, one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived. From the moment she sang Over the Rainbow in The Wizard of Oz, her breathtaking voice and raw, vulnerable talent captured the hearts of the world. She was a force of nature, a superstar of stage and screen whose legendary concert performances at Carnegie Hall and the London Palladium are still spoken of with awe. But behind the powerhouse voice was a dark and sinister secret born at MGM. As a teenager, she was put on a grueling schedule and piled with amphetamines or pep pills to keep her awake and working for days on end. Then, to get her to sleep, she was given barbiturates. Her lifelong addiction wasn't a choice. It was a condition manufactured by the very studio that was profiting from her talent. Her financial situation was a lifelong catastrophe. Decades of poor management by others, combined with her own lavish spending to maintain the image of a superstar, left her in a state of perpetual, crushing debt. She was constantly on the run from the IRS, to whom she owed hundreds of thousands in back taxes, forcing her to take any job she could, no matter how taxing on her fragile health. Her final performances in London at the Talk of the Town nightclub were a heartbreaking spectacle. The once mighty voice was now often fragile and cracking, the iconic performer sometimes unsteady on her feet. While she still had moments of pure brilliance, audiences were witnessing the final flickering moments of a legend being crushed by debt and exhaustion, performing not for glory, but for survival. When Judy Garland died of an accidental overdose at the age of 47, the final shock was revealed. Her estate was not just empty. It was assessed to be over $4 million in debt, an almost unimaginable sum at the time. The girl with the ruby slippers, whose voice brought joy to millions, died without a home, without security, and without a single penny to her name. These stories are more than just sad tales of bad luck or poor personal choices. They are stark, cautionary tales about a ruthless system that could build a mortal into a god, only to discard them the moment they showed a human flaw. The dazzling glamour of Hollywood's golden age was undeniably real, but it often cast a very long and very dark shadow. A shadow where stars paid a terrible price in secret long after the cameras stopped rolling. The line between a Hollywood ending and a tragic one was thinner than anyone knew, and for these 10 stars it vanished completely. Whose story shocked you the most? Was it the hero buried without a name, or the Oscar winner denied her final wish? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want more untold stories from the dark side of the Dream Factory, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell for notifications. Thank you for watching.